The moment I stepped through the glass doors of the mansion, everything stopped. Music cut mid-beat. Glasses froze halfway to mouths. A woman literally dropped her champagne flute, and it shattered on the marble floor, but nobody even looked at it. Because I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be dead. And yet, there I was, standing at the entrance of the same party where they were celebrating my end. For a full 3 seconds, nobody moved. Not a single person. Then someone whispered it barely audible, like their brain refused to accept reality. No, that's not possible. And that's when I saw him. The man who left me for dead. He was standing near the center of the room, holding a drink, laughing just seconds before. Now his face went pale like someone had drained every drop of blood from it. His glass slipped slightly in his hand. Not dropped. Not yet. Just slipping. Because even he couldn't process what he was seeing. Me. Alive. My name is Adrian Cole. And 3 days ago, I died. At least, that's what they told everyone. That's what they celebrated. That's what they built this entire night around. A private mansion party. Luxury lights. Music. Champagne. And a guest list full of people who came to celebrate my accident. My disappearance. My end. But what none of them knew was that I survived the moment they thought would erase me completely. And I watched everything after. It started with trust. That's always how it starts. You don't notice betrayal when it walks in smiling. You don't notice danger when it calls you brother, partner, or family. You only notice it when it's already too late. And for me, it was almost too late. 2 weeks before this night, I had everything. A stable business consulting contract, a growing financial advisory role with a private firm, and a circle of people I genuinely believed I could trust, especially Marcus Hale, my closest business associate, the kind of man who always knew what to say, always showed up when it mattered, always acted like loyalty was his strongest trait. He wasn't just a colleague. He was my safe person. Or so I thought. The first crack appeared subtly. Small inconsistencies. Documents that didn't match. Emails I never sent showing up in drafts. Confidential files accessed at odd hours. At first, I thought it was a system error. Then I thought it was incompetence from the IT department. I even laughed it off once in front of Marcus. "You guys need better security," I told him jokingly. He smiled. But now I remember that smile differently. Because it wasn't amusement. It was confirmation. Like I had just walked closer to a trap that was already set. The night everything collapsed started like any other business trip. We were supposed to visit a private offshore facility for a routine evaluation. Marcus insisted I come along. Said it would strengthen our partnership. Said it was important. I see everything firsthand. I remember thinking how professional he sounded. How structured. How reassuring. Now I realize it was preparation. Not collaboration. We arrived just after sunset. The location was isolated, surrounded by water on one side and dense forest on the other. No signal. No nearby roads. Just a private dock and a facility that looked far more secure than anything I had seen before. That should have been my first warning. It wasn't, because I trusted him. Inside, everything felt off. Too quiet, too clean, too controlled. There were no casual employees, no normal movement, just structured personnel who spoke in clipped sentences and avoided eye contact. Marcus led me through the facility like he belonged there more than anyone else. And then we reached the observation section. That's when I noticed the doors locked behind us. Softly. Silently, but deliberately, I turned to him. "Is there a reason we're locking in?" He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me for a second longer than necessary. Then said, "Standard protocol." But his voice changed slightly when he said it. Less friendly, more detached. Like I was no longer a colleague. Like I was a variable. That's when I saw the others. 2 men I didn't recognize. Standing near the control panel. Watching us. Not speaking. Not moving. Just observing. And suddenly, I realized I was the only person in the room who didn't look like they belonged there. Before I could react, Marcus stepped closer. "Adrian," he said calmly. Too calmly. "I need you to understand something." That sentence alone made my stomach tighten. Because people don't say that when everything is fine. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. A remote. That's when everything slowed down. My brain caught up before my body did, and I took a step back. But it was already too late. The room changed. Not physically, but structurally. A pressure shift. A mechanical sound somewhere beneath the floor. And then the lights dimmed slightly. Not off, just controlled. Like the environment was being reset. Marcus sighed. Not regretfully. Not emotionally. Professionally. I tried to do this the clean way, he said. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because it confirmed intent. Do what? I asked. He finally looked me directly in the eyes. And said it. You were never supposed to leave this facility. Silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. For a moment, my brain refused to process the words. Not because they were unclear, but because they were too clear, too direct, too final. And then everything happened at once. The men near the control panel moved. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Controlled. One of them tapped something on a screen. Another checked a device. Marcus stepped back slightly, and I realized something horrifying. This wasn't a conversation. It was execution planning. I backed toward the door. It didn't open. I tried again. Locked. Not surprising. Just confirmed. Marcus spoke again, this time softer. You should have stayed predictable. That sentence stayed with me, because it meant this wasn't random. It meant I had been studied, evaluated, assessed, and then the truth hit fully. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't corruption. This was intentional removal. I ran, not thinking, just reacting. Down the hallway, past sealed doors, past warning lights flashing red. Footsteps behind me, but not rushed. Measured, like they already knew where I would go. And that's when I hit the final corridor. The exit dock access. Freedom. Or what should have been. But the moment I reached it, the door wouldn't budge. And behind me, footsteps stopped. No chase anymore. Because they didn't need to chase. They had already decided the outcome. Marcus's voice came from behind me. Calm. Final. Adrian. This was always the plan. I turned slowly and saw him standing there. Not angry. Not emotional. Just resolved. Like everything had already been signed off somewhere higher than both of us. That's when I realized something worse. Marcus wasn't acting alone. He was executing instructions. Before I could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then everything went dark. The last thing I remember from that facility was the sound of the ocean outside and Marcus saying one final sentence in the darkness. They'll believe it was an accident. I woke up hours later, not in the facility, not in a hospital, but somewhere I didn't recognize. Cold air, gravel beneath me, and silence. Too much silence. My body hurt. My head was spinning. And my first thought wasn't survival. It was confusion. Because if I was alive, then why was everything so quiet? I reached into my pocket. Empty. No phone. No wallet. No identification. Nothing. Except one folded piece of paper I hadn't noticed before. I opened it slowly and read the words. Just 4 words. You didn't survive. I froze, because that wasn't a statement. It was a belief. Their belief, that's when I heard something far away. Sirens. Multiple. Approaching fast. And then voices. Distorted. Official. Controlled. And in that moment, I understood the second part of the plan. They weren't just trying to remove me. They were already preparing the story. The narrative. The ending. And as I lay there in the dark, I realized something terrifying. Whatever had just happened wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of my erasure. The first thing I remember after the sirens wasn't sound. It was pressure. Heavy boots in the distance. Flashing red and blue light bleeding through the trees like the night itself was being torn open. And that voice over the radio, victim confirmed deceased. Proceed with public announcement. I stayed completely still. Not because I was dead, but because I realized something far more important. If they believed I was dead, then I had time. Time to disappear. Time to understand. Time to decide what kind of return they would never forget. My name was still Adrian Cole, but in that moment, I stopped being Adrian Cole, the victim, and started becoming Adrian Cole, the problem. I waited until the footsteps moved past, until the voices shifted away from me, until the lights faded deeper into the forest line. Then I moved, slowly, carefully. Every muscle in my body felt like it was arguing with me. but I forced myself up anyway. The ground was uneven gravel mixed with damp soil. No clear path. No direction. Just instinct. And survival. I didn't know where I was, but I knew where I couldn't stay. Because if Marcus and his people had already started the public announcement, that meant one thing. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were trying to erase me. Legally, socially, financially, completely. I walked for what felt like hours. No phone, no money, no identification. Just a shredded memory of a facility I now understood was never meant to release me. At some point, I stopped hearing sirens. At another point, I stopped seeing lights. And eventually, I stopped believing anyone was coming to help. Because no one was coming for me. They were coming for closure. I found a small roadside gas station just before sunrise. Old, barely lit. The kind of place where nobody asks questions because nobody wants answers. I stayed outside for a few minutes, watching my reflection in the glass window. Blood dried on my collar. Dust on my face. Eyes that didn't look like mine anymore. I didn't look like someone who survived. I looked like someone who shouldn't exist. Inside, I used the payphone. Old technology. Perfect anonymity. I dialed the only number I could remember without thinking. My assistant, Carla. It rang 3 times. Then 4. Then she picked up. Hello? Her voice was normal. Too normal. Like nothing had changed in the world. That contrast almost broke me. Carla, I said quietly. Silence. Then a shift in her breathing. Who is this? She asked. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I realized she might already believe I was dead. It's me, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. Then a shaky inhale. That's not possible, she whispered. And that was the moment I knew the news had already spread. The story had already been written. And I was already in it, as a past tense sentence. What happened? She finally asked. I looked out the window at the empty road and said the only truth I could offer. They tried to erase me. That was enough. No details needed. She understood immediately. Her voice dropped. Adrian, they announced your death this morning. I closed my eyes. So it was done. The story was public. The narrative locked. The world had already moved on without me. Who announced it? I asked. There was hesitation again. Then she said the name I already feared. Marcus. Of course. I gripped the phone tighter. What exactly did he say? Carla's voice became careful. They said there was an incident during a site visit, offshore facility malfunction. No survivors confirmed. A pause. And your family? They've already started arrangements. Arrangements. That word hit differently now, because it didn't mean grief. It meant execution of process. Adrian, she continued softly, there's more. I stayed silent. Marcus took emergency control of your accounts. That was expected, but still devastating. And she hesitated again. I could hear papers moving on her end. He filed something called a continuity claim. I frowned. I never authorized anything like that. I know, she said quickly, but it's been accepted provisionally. That was the moment everything snapped into focus. This wasn't just betrayal. It was structured theft, legal manipulation, coordinated identity removal. I leaned against the gas station wall. My body felt heavier than before, because now I understood. My death wasn't just physical. It was administrative, and that made it harder to undo. Carla, I said, listen carefully. My voice was steady now, not emotional, focused. I need everything you can access. Logs, emails, financial activity, anything tied to Marcus from the last 30 days. She hesitated. This is dangerous. I know. Another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. I already started looking. That surprised me, because it meant I wasn't the only one who felt something was wrong. What did you find? I asked. Her voice dropped lower. There were transfers, routed through offshore accounts, but they were disguised as emergency restructuring. I straightened. Who signed off on them? Another pause. Then, your credentials. That hit differently, because it meant one thing. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me responsible for my own disappearance. I closed my eyes again. Carla, I said slowly, those signatures weren't mine. I know, she replied, but they're digitally verified. Of course they were. That was the point. Someone had access to my identity, not physical, digital, which meant this had been prepared long before the facility incident. I stepped away from the wall, and for the first time since I woke up, I felt something sharper than fear. Clarity, because now I knew what I was dealing with. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a long-term plan. A coordinated removal of everything I was, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a report. "Carla," I said, "I need one more thing." "What?" "Where is Marcus now?" There was a pause, then typing, then silence. And finally, "There's a private gathering tonight." My grip tightened. "Where?" She hesitated, then answered, "His estate. Celebration event." That word landed harder than anything else. Celebration. Not mourning. Not grief. Celebration. They weren't just declaring me dead. They were enjoying it. "Who's invited?" I asked. She sighed softly. "Business partners, family, legal advisors." A pause. "And people who were close to you." That last part mattered most, because it meant I wasn't just erased. I was being replaced in memory. Publicly, socially, emotionally. I looked at my reflection again in the glass. And for the first time, I saw something new. Not a victim, not a survivor. Something in between. Something forming. "I'm going," I said. Carla immediately responded, "No, Adrian, that's insane. If they believe you're dead." "They don't believe it," I interrupted. "They're acting on it." That difference mattered. There was silence on the line. Then she said quietly, "If you go there, you'll be walking into a controlled environment." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Exactly. Because controlled environments are predictable, and predictable systems can be broken." Before she could respond again, I added, "Send me everything you find, every file, every trace, especially anything tied to Marcus's last offshore visit." There was hesitation. Then, "I will." The call ended, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching the empty road, thinking. They had tried to erase me physically, then socially, then legally, but they made one mistake. They didn't confirm it. They assumed it. And assumptions are fragile. I checked the small mirror behind the gas station counter, washing my face with cold water, trying to remove the last trace of that facility, but something inside me had already changed. Not broken, shifted. Because now I understood the truth. Marcus didn't just want me gone. He wanted me replaced in history. A clean ending, a neat story, a controlled narrative. And tonight, at that estate, they were celebrating the completion of that story. I left the gas station without speaking to anyone. No plan, no disguise, no preparation, just direction. As I walked down the road, I made one decision. If they wanted a funeral, then I would give them something much worse. A return. And not the kind they could explain away. The gates to Marcus Hale's estate looked different at night. Not just expensive, not just guarded, but controlled. 2 black SUVs sat parked at the entrance like silent warnings. Security lights swept across the road in slow, deliberate patterns, like the entire property was breathing on a schedule. Inside, I could already see it. Warm golden lights, music, silhouettes moving behind tall glass windows, laughter, celebration. They weren't mourning me. They were finishing me. Or at least, they thought they were. I tightened my grip on the invitation in my pocket. Celebration of closure. That phrase kept repeating in my head like a joke no one was supposed to hear. Because I was still alive, and I was standing outside the party built on my death. My name is Adrian Cole, and this is where I stopped running. I walked toward the entrance. No disguise, no hesitation. Just steady steps on stone pavement that felt louder with every movement. The first guard noticed me, then the second, then both at the same time. Their posture changed instantly. Not aggressive yet, confused, evaluating, because I didn't look like a threat. I looked like a mistake. "Invitation?" one of them asked. I slowly pulled it out and handed it over. He scanned it, then looked at me again. Longer this time, something in his expression shifted. Not recognition, but uncertainty. Because according to that paper, I didn't exist. He stepped aside. "Go in." That was it. No further questions. No alarms. Because in their system, I was already accounted for. Already dead. Already inside their story. The doors opened, and I stepped into the party. The sound hit me first. Music. Glass clinking. laughter layered over conversation. People dressed in expensive suits and dresses, standing in clusters like this, was just another business celebration. Nobody looked at me at first. Why would they? I wasn't supposed to be here. I took one step inside, then another, and that's when the first person noticed me. A woman near the bar. She froze mid-sip. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her eyes locked onto me. Confusion first, then disbelief, then fear. Because her brain was trying to match what she saw with what she believed, and it didn't fit. Her glass slipped, shattered. The sound cut through the room. That's when heads started turning, one by one, like a slow wave of realization moving across the space, until finally, the entire room saw me, and everything stopped. Music, conversation, movement, even breathing felt different, because I wasn't supposed to be standing there. I was supposed to be a story they already finished telling. At the center of the room stood Marcus, surrounded by guests, holding a glass, mid-laugh, until he saw me. And then, nothing. No reaction, no movement, just stillness. Like the world had briefly paused to decide whether I was real. Then I saw Linda, near the far side of the room. Her hand went to her mouth immediately. Not subtle, not controlled. Shock, pure shock. She shook her head slightly, like denial could undo reality. No, she whispered, but it wasn't for me. It was for everything collapsing in front of her. Marcus finally moved, slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a malfunctioning system. He set his glass down, didn't break eye contact, and walked toward me. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Not angry, not surprised anymore. Just corrected, like I had violated a rule. I nodded slightly. That seems to be the theme tonight. A few guests gasped. Because I spoke, that was the first crack. Marcus stopped a few feet away from me. His voice dropped lower. How did you get in? I looked around the room. At the guests, at the cameras, at the people still processing what they were seeing. Then back at him. I was invited. That sentence landed wrong, because it implied something deeper. A man near the side stepped forward. Legal advisor. He looked at me carefully, then whispered something to Marcus. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten. This isn't possible, Marcus said finally. I took a step closer. Neither was my death, I replied. Silence. Again. The room started shifting now. Whispers returning. Phones coming out. People recording. Because something was wrong in a way no one could ignore anymore. Marcus lowered his voice. This doesn't change anything. But I shook my head. It changes everything. I reached into my pocket, slowly, and pulled out a small device. Not dramatic, not flashy, just a recorder. I think, I said, loud enough for the room to hear now. Some of you were told I died in an offshore incident. A few heads nodded slowly. Others froze. But what actually happened, I continued, was very different. I pressed play. The audio filled the room. Marcus's voice first. Controlled. Clear. Once he's contained at the facility, we proceed with the declaration. No direct exposure. No trace back. A ripple moved through the guests. People turned toward Marcus instantly. Another voice followed. Linda's voice. As long as the paperwork clears, the rest becomes automatic. Gasps. Actual gasps now. Because this wasn't confusion anymore. It was exposure. Marcus stepped forward sharply. Turn that off. But no one moved. Because the room wasn't following him anymore. It was following the truth. I stopped the recording, then looked at the crowd. You're celebrating a man's death, I said. Pause. But the man you're celebrating never actually died. Chaos started forming instantly. People talking over each other. Questions. Anger. Fear. Confusion. Marcus raised his voice now. This is manipulated. But nobody responded. Not like before. Not with certainty. Because certainty had already broken. Linda stepped forward slightly. Her voice cracked. Marcus, what is this? That was new. She wasn't supporting him anymore. She was questioning him. That shift mattered more than anything else. Because control doesn't collapse all at once. It collapses socially first. Marcus turned to her sharply. Stay out of this. But it was too late. Too many people were listening now. I took another step forward. I didn't come here to argue, I said calmly. I came here to correct a story. I looked directly at Marcus, specifically the part where you thought I couldn't speak for myself. The room was fully fractured now. Some guests were leaving, others recording everything. Some frozen, some angry, some afraid. Marcus looked around the room and realized something. He was losing them. Not me. Them. That's when his tone changed. Lower. More controlled again. This is a misunderstanding, he said carefully. But nobody believed it anymore. I watched him closely, because I could see it. The shift in strategy. When denial stops working, people move to damage control. Marcus leaned slightly toward me. Whatever you think you have, he whispered. It won't hold up. I nodded. Maybe not. A pause. But this room will. That hit differently. Because he understood what I meant. This wasn't about courts. It wasn't about documents anymore. It was about witnesses. I turned slightly toward the guests. You were all brought here tonight under a false assumption. A pause. And now you know why. Silence again. But heavier. More permanent. Marcus finally stepped back. Just slightly. And for the first time, I saw it. Not fear. Not anger. Loss of control. He reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out his phone, unlocked it, typed something quickly, then showed it to someone off to the side. A man I hadn't noticed before, who nodded once. That's when I felt it. Something shifting again. Not socially this time. Operationally, I leaned slightly forward and whispered to myself, "What are you doing?" Marcus looked at me again and smiled. Not confidently, not proudly, but knowingly, like this wasn't the end of anything, just the transition point. And then he said something that changed the entire room. You think this is the reveal? A pause. But it's just activation. Before I could respond, the lights in the mansion flickered once, then twice, then switched to emergency red. Alarms didn't sound, but systems changed. Doors locked automatically. Phones started losing signal. People looked around confused, and Marcus calmly said, "Contingency protocol is now active." That's when I realized the party wasn't the end of his plan. It was the trigger. As guests rushed toward the exits and security systems locked down the mansion, Marcus looked directly at me one last time and said, "You were never meant to expose us here, only to confirm you were alive." And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't an exposure. It was a trap that had just fully activated with me inside it.